So when we think of the Civil War, we think of massive armies clashing in open battlefields. But in the rugged Blue Ridge Mountains of Floyd County, Virginia, a completely different secret war began quietly, but was soon raging. By 1862, nearly a quarter of Floyd County soldiers had deserted the Confederate Army, resenting a rich man's war and a poor man's fight. Instead of fleeing north, these men banded together in the mountains of their home, creating a heavily armed resistance and a network so powerful it became known as Sissons Kingdom. Off in the distance, I hear a piece of equipment running, hopefully building a road. Always handy. Now, the reason to bring you to the top of the ridge is to talk about the history of the land that we are now caretaking. The older I get, the more I realize we don't own it. We're just taking care of it till the next generation. I'm going to tell you a story that comes from a brief history of this land. I'll introduce you to the original land grant here in Virginia, and then we'll quickly move forward to a special period of time after 1862 when some suspicious activity took place here in the western highlands of Virginia. Join me. So what you're looking at right now, believe it or not, is a stone wall from the 1790s. Many of these stone walls we're going to look at here were created between 1790 and 1800 by the Weddell family, sometimes spelled W-E-T-T-E-L, but commonly here now it's W-A-D-D-L-E. And what's surprising is all of the trees you see as you pan around have grown since the 1800s. This entire highland ridge was denuded of trees. A fancy word for saying this was high meadow. There were no trees here. And what we're looking at, I'll bring you a close-up, is a stone wall. Woo, let's go for a trip. That this family built over a 20-year period. Mostly the children who would stay here in the high meadow, tending to cattle, hogs, any farm animal that they could move to the high pasture during the summer. It was much cooler up here, and the grass grew very thick and lush. You couldn't tell it right now in the middle of all these trees. Right there is an important piece of history. And I'm going to move around and film it from the south side. Hold still. So we're back to the face view of this stone wall. And what you'll see on this mountainside are hundreds of ancient stone walls, all created around the 1800 timeline by the single family, the Weddells. So it's going to be a little difficult, but I'm going to walk you around slowly and show you the extent of these stone walls. Imagine being in Scotland, Ireland, areas of Europe, where the idea for these high meadows came from. Bavaria, even, where they would clear the land and build these stone walls to improve pasture. So right here, downhill from me, is two 1,000-foot long sections of stone wall. And then I'm standing on one section of stone wall. And above me, it may be hard to make out, but you can see two 700 to 800 foot long sections of stone wall running along the face of this ridge. It's quite amazing how much work people actually do when they're not in front of a computer. Oh, I mean, like right now. I'm going to try to navigate through the trees. But you can see the thousands of metric tons of stone that were moved to create these pastures. It's quite extensive. Now, that brings me to the story we're going to talk about today, which was not 1790 or 1800, but 1862. Something dramatic happened here. But in 1862, at the beginning of the Civil War, things changed dramatically here in the western county that is now Floyd. In Floyd County, a secret civil war began in 1862, and here in this county started what became known as Sissons Kingdom. A large body of disaffected soldiers from the Confederate Army came back home to Floyd County, mainly because of the Confederate law eliminating the need for slave owners who held 20 slaves to fight in the war. It's an instant knowledge to the farmers of Floyd that they weren't fighting for states' rights, as many had claimed, but they're fighting for landowners, slaveholders, not for themselves or for their own independence. These disaffected soldiers came back to Floyd County by the hundreds, maybe as many as 1,300, between 1862 and the end of the war in 1865. Certainly by the time that General Stoneman made his tour through Danville and into Stewart and Floyd counties. So when we think of the Civil War, we think of massive armies clashing in open battlefields. But in the rugged Blue Ridge Mountains of Floyd County, Virginia, a completely different secret war began quietly, but was soon raging. By 1862, nearly a quarter of Floyd County soldiers had deserted the Confederate Army, resenting a rich man's war and a poor man's fight. Instead of fleeing north, these men banded together in the mountains of their home, creating a heavily armed resistance and a network so powerful it became known as Sissons Kingdom. Sissons Kingdom began. Secret societies like the Red Strings and a civilian early warning system cropped up throughout the county. This internal rebellion shattered the myth of a unified South. The South was falling apart from within long before Appomattox. I'm not aware of, but in my research I come across that there's a scholar named Rand Dotson who has apparently documented these struggles in Virginia before. I haven't come across his work specifically, but It's referenced throughout some of the information you find on the internet. History remembers the Civil War as a battle fought on grand fields between massive armies. But in the rugged Blue Ridge Mountains of Floyd County, Virginia, a completely different war was raging. It was an internal guerrilla war, neighbor against neighbor, fought in the dense woodlands and the steep hollows and the mountain ridges of the highlands of Virginia. By 1862, the Confederate dream was fracturing from within. While the rest of Virginia saw an average desertion rate of about 11%, Floyd County was a hotbed of defiance. Nearly 23% of its 1,300 servicemen chose to walk away from the Southern cause after the proclamation of the slaveholders. In the rise of Sissons Kingdom in Floyd County, Virginia, the men who fled the Confederate Army didn't run north. They went back home to the mountains that they knew well, hiding in places like Bent Mountain, but they didn't hide in isolation. They soon banded together in heavily armed gangs to protect themselves with mutual defense. The most well-documented of these gangs was led by two brothers, David Sloan Sisson and James Madison Sisson. David had served in the 54th Virginia Infantry. Now he and his brother commanded the county's largest and most aggressive partisan network. Their dominance near Bent Mountain was so total that locals began calling the region Sissons Kingdom. Confederate Brigadier General John Echols wrote an urgent letter back to Richmond. It states, "To the authorities in Richmond, the rebellion in Southwest Virginia is uniquely sophisticated. The runaways have completely usurped our authority. They have gone so far as to elect their own Brigadier General of Deserters. They have established a shadow unionist state government, electing a rogue legislature and a governor. They reject us entirely," speaking of the Confederacy. Sisson's men survived because they had help, a massive, covert, pro-union underground network known as the Heroes of America, or commonly the Red Strings. They operated in the shadows, using coded handshakes and secret passwords. They actively subverted the Confederacy. Among the strongest allies for the Heroes of America were the religious pacifists from the Church of the Brethren, known at the time as the Dunkards. They firmly opposed both secession and slavery, and in the Berks Fork and Little River districts, men like John Weddell, Elder Christian Bowman, and a wealthy Unionist, David Weddell Sr., operated a lifeline. It could be said of David Weddell Sr., "Let them threaten us. We will not support this rebellion. Every week we feed as many as 150 deserters right here at the farm. Every man who leaves their army is a victory for peace." And this brings us to this land that I just introduced you to, and these stone walls and this 360-degree view of the local surroundings. This is where the Confederate deserters held their lifeline while waiting on the Union victory. Here on the home front, the women formed an early warning system. Whenever Confederate home guards or conscription officers rode into the valley, the women would blow horns and signal the deserters in any way they could to vanish into the hills. This ridge right here, and Bent Mountain farther to the east. By 1864, the conflict erupted into an absolute neighbor versus neighbor blood feud. Robert E. Lee took to the threat so seriously, he ordered regular Army hunting squads into Floyd County to crush the uprising. This was no common attention to the deserters. The Confederate forces unleashed a campaign of terror. They beat residents, threatened to hang pacifist ministers, and burned David Weddell's corn crops to the ground. But Sissons Kingdom struck back with equal ferocity. Deserters routinely ambushed the home guards, raided the local Floyd County jail to liberate any captured comrade, and plundered pro-Confederate farms for supplies. When a Confederate recruiter was killed near Bent Mountain, the Sisson gang tracked down an eyewitness and burned their house to the ground to enforce total silence. By 1865, Confederate control had completely disintegrated. Richmond had given up on enforcing law and order in Floyd, effectively leaving Sissons Kingdom and the remainder of the Floyd County deserters to their own control, their own destiny. When federal cavalry under Major General George Stoneman finally raided the county in early April, they found a population already fractured. Local pro-Confederates, knowing the war was lost, offered no resistance. The history of Floyd County shatters the post-war myth of a completely unified South. The Confederacy didn't just fall to Northern armies. Its own people actively pulled the rug out from under it. With the surrender, the deserters finally came down from the ridge. David Sisson returned to civilian life, eventually running a general store in the very county he had once rebelled against. But while the guns fell silent, the bitter social divisions between the Loyalist and the deserter families would linger in the shadows of this Blue Ridge Mountain for generations. It is probably possible to talk to people today that hold resentment for either Southern or Union control. How odd. All of this right here on the land we're currently caretaking for. I'm documenting this story, so hopefully the people in the future, the next landowner, will understand some of the history of this land. Bye for now.